class. Today we'll be learning how to take accurate body measurements. So we'll be starting with the basic bodies. Okay, let's measure the shoulder width. Shoulder width is measured from here to here. And so on the human body there is a bone here. Okay, can you see this bone? So you trace the bone from one bone to the other. That's what you are measuring. Okay, so assuming it's a human body, for Sharon the line will serve as the bone. Okay, from one line to the other. So on the human body you are measuring from one bone to the other. Okay, Sharon's shoulder width measurement is 13.25. Okay, mostly for humans you see that from one bone to the other is 14. For other humans it can be 15, and yet for others who has broad shoulders you can even see 16, though 16 is somehow rare. Okay, so that's how to take the shoulder width measurement. The next measurement you'll be needing is your shoulder to bust measurement. Shoulder to bust. This is how to measure. You measure from here. Okay, please note where I'm placing my tape. Let me use myself. Measure from here. Okay, not behind and not here, but here. Okay, I hope that can be seen. You place your tape there like this and measure down to the nipple points, right? So for Sharon, I'm taking that measurement. For Sharon, shoulder to nipple is 10. So this is how to measure. The next measurement, that shoulder to bust. From here, you have your bust line, right? The next measurement is your shoulder to front half length. Now, to get your front half length, what you need to do is to tie a cord around your waistline, which is always very effective. The reason why you do that is so that there will be no guesswork. You know exactly where your waistline is. Now, for you to know exactly where you are supposed to tie your cord, if it's a plus size lady, you ask her to tilt. But if not, you will see. Basically, you see where the waistline is. But if the person is a plus size, she needs to tilt to one side. When she tilts, the side that deepens in, that's where the waistline circumference should be taken from. Or another way you do this is by measuring 2 inches upwards from your navel. Okay, so from this navel you measure 2 inches upwards, you get to the waistline. So Sharon's waistline is quite clear, so I will just tie on that point. Can you see? So this is our waistline. This is our waistline. So for the front half length, you place your tape the same way I demonstrated earlier, and then just come straight. When you get here, you place your tape under your bust. Our shoulder to our front half length is 17 inches. Have you seen how I measured? So I deepened my tape measure under the bust before I pass through to the waistline. Okay, now one major reason why we have to tie a cord around the waistline is due to the fact that the front and the back half lengths are not equal. Okay, so now that we have measured the front half length, let's measure the back half length. Okay, take a look at Sharon behind. So we have tied the cord at exactly the same point with the front, right? So now we want to measure, we want to know the back half length. So to take your back half length, you know this bone at your center back. So that's where you measure from, right? So assuming you have traced the bone now, from here, you measure down. Can you see? Our back half length is 13 inches against the front, which was 17. So there's a difference of 4 inches. This was caused by no other thing than the bust. Can you see this? Remember, we measured from the under bust like this. We entered before we passed. The back does not have a bust, but the front has a bust. You see that kind of big difference when the person is really busty. But mostly you see difference of 2 inches, 3 inches, 2.5 inches. But for this 4 inches is because my Sharon is very, very busty, and then she is slim. Okay, she's slim, she's small. So the back is 13 inches while the front is 17 inches. So that's a total difference of 4 inches. So We have talked about front arc length and back arc length next. Please be taking them down so that you know the exact measurement you need. So next we'll be taking our bust circumference, okay? This is when you are measuring for an half scale basic bodice, right? But if it's for a full scale basic bodice, at this point you now measure your full length, okay? The full length of the dress. You know, from here to here is 17 inches. So to get the full length of the dress, you measure from here to on top of your area, just on top. So 8 plus 17, that will give you 25. So Sharon's full bodice will be 25 inches, full scale bodice, the length will be 25 inches. So if you're also doing a full scale bodice, you need to measure your hip circumference, the widest point of your hip. That's where you measure. And this is how you measure. You trace the widest point and place the tape all around, okay? Ensuring that the tape goes around even at the back. And then you place just at least 2 fingers on the inside like this. 2 fingers, shouldn't be more than 2, and then see where it is. Okay, you cross check to know if the back is also inside the tape, the highest point of the back. Can you see? So Sharon's hip circumference is 40 inches. So that's how to get the hip. So for a full scale bodice, you need the hips. Now, the next thing we want to take is our waistline circumference. You measure around that cord where you have tied, that area where you have tied the cord, right? So this is how you do it. Also, not more than 2 fingers inside. For the waist circumference measurement, it needs to be tight and fitted. Okay, so this is 25.5 for Sharon. So also note that you are not adding allowance. Don't allow your clients to tell you, shift am small. I don't want it to be tight or abeg. Your clothes today dey tight. I don't want to shift am small, shift am small. Then you now do like this. That is wrong. You don't add ease while measuring. You have to take the exact measurement the way it is. It is while drafting, you now add ease to ensure that it is not fitted on the client's body, like you know what that means already. So this is it. This is how you measure. The next measurement is your bust circumference measurement. For the bust circumference measurement, you won't take it as fitted as the waistline circumference, okay? Because of course you don't want your breast to look flat. Me, okay, can you see this? So Sharon is 34.5 in bust circumference. Okay, so for a basic bodice, we are left with 3 measurements now. So the next measurement is our bust span measurements, otherwise known as nipple to nipple. That's the general name people call it, but it is called a bust span. Bust span. Okay, so you measure from one nipple to the other nipple to get your bust span. This is it. Very important measurement. For Sharon, a bust span is 6 inches. Okay. So if you are measuring the bust span for a human, you might ask the person to touch where the nipples are, so it will guide you to measure if you cannot see it yourself, right? So the next measurement you want to take is the across front measurements. Your across front measurements, you take it like this. You measure 4 inches from your shoulder down. Okay, from here now, this is where you now take your across front measurements. The across front is simply the distance between the part that a sleeve will be attached, okay, to the next part, to the second part that the second sleeve will be attached, okay? So you just measure like this and like this. Sharon's across front is 11 inches, okay? On my body, let me demonstrate it so you understand very well. So for this sleeve, it's a kind of stylish off-shoulder sleeve. It's not a normal sleeve. So let's say a basic sleeve passes through like this. Can you see? Can you see my hand? Okay, you would know that the basic sleeve will pass through like this. So the across front measurement is taken like this. You measure from here 4 inches down and it will lead you here, okay? Can you see a line here? So you measure from this line towards this other side where you find that same line. So that line indicates where your sleeve will pass through. Can you see? Can you see? I hope this demonstration makes it clearer. Then for the back, the same thing. The same thing, you measure 4 inches from this point down. When you measure 4 down, you trace where your sleeve will pass and measure. The back across front is mostly wider than the front across front. So for Sharon, the back across front is 12. Then for me, my back across, I can't demonstrate it now because I'll need someone to do that for me. So that is it. Across front is usually smaller than across back. We'll be making use of these measurements from time to time during our drafting process. So that's how to measure for basic bodies. Now let's take measurements for a basic skirt. To measure for a basic skirt, these are the measurements you need. You will need your waist circumference measurements. For a client, you always ask, where do you want your skirt band to be placed? Is it on your navel or it should be up? Wherever the client touches, on that point you measure the waist circumference, okay? You measure it in a fitted way. Ensure that it is fitted. Then apart from that, the next measurement is your hip rise. Your hip rise is simply the distance between your waist and your hip, okay? From the waist point that your client asks you to measure, you measure, let's assume you want to leave the skirt here now. You measure from here to the widest point of your hip, right? So for Sharon, her hip rise is 10 inches. So the next measurement apart from hip rise is your hip circumference. Your hip circumference measurements, as I demonstrated earlier in the bodice part, hip circumference is measured like this. Okay, you place your tape around the widest point of your hip like this, and it shouldn't be measured too tightly and too loosely. Okay, can you see? So that's how to measure for your hip circumference. The last but not the least measurement in skirt making is your waist to hem measurements. That is the full length of the skirt. If you are making a mini skirt, you can stop at 12 inches for Sharon. Full length, okay? Take the full length of the skirt. That's all for the skirt measurements. I hope you understand. Then it's time to measure for trousers. To measure for your trousers, how you do this is you will need your waist circumference in the same way, just like you measured for a skirt. You ask your client where she wants the trouser waist to be, right? So you measure from there. The waist circumference, let's assume the pound to be here. This is your waist circumference. Then from here, you take your hip rise. You take your hip rise, you take your hip circumference, right? And then you take the full length of the pants. Take the full length of the pants. Then your knee circumference. To measure for your knee, I'm supposed to wear a trouser to show you this. You tilt your knee forward and then measure around the knee. Then also for your ankle, you tilt, okay, let me go further. You tiptoe like this and then you measure your ankle and ensure that what you have measured can go out of your leg, okay, can go out of your leg. Maybe you have measured 12 inches for the ankle like this. Ensure that that 12 inches can be worn as a shoe and can go out like that. So there are other measurements that we need for a trouser. These measurements are called derived measurements, okay? So your derived measurements comes with their formulas. You work with the formula and get it accordingly. The derived measurement has to do with number one, your crotch depth. You can derive your crotch depth through the formulas, okay? The formulas are displayed on the screen already. Your crotch depth, your crotch extension, front crotch extension and back crotch extension. These measurements can be derived with the formulas you see on the screen. Then if your client insists that you must measure crotch depth, okay, this is how to measure. You sit on a flat surface, a stool, okay? When you sit there, ensure that your knees are not bending forward, they are just straight. In that way, you now measure from the the waistline you measure to the surface. Okay, so that's how to measure for a trouser. Those that are taking my class in trousers will know how to do that already. So that's all we are taking for measurements.